Hey everyone, David Griscom of Left Reckoning here with some pretty exciting news. We're going to be hitting the road soon, and our first stop is in Los Angeles, California. Myself, Matt Leck, Ben Burgis, and Jason Miles are going to be at the Terragram Ballroom on October 23rd. General admission tickets are up now on their website, and there's also going to be a special VIP meet and greet option as well before the show. When we went to LA with the Michael Brooks show a couple years ago, it was a really memorable night, and I can't wait to recapture some of that energy and see many of y'all there. We're going to be joined by Annika Spirian, Danny Bessner, Nando Villa, Deep State Cuba, and also C. Derek Varn. It's going to be so much fun, y'all, and I hope you can make it. Come see us, y'all.
All right. My name is Ben Burgis. This is Give Them an Argument. I'm joined by our super producer, Jake Appett, and by our very talented graphic designer, J. Andrew World. Voice you just heard, of course, was our good friend and comrade, David Griscom, talking about the LA live show that's coming up next month. Really excited about that. All the info for that is in the description for this episode. Going to be much more about that coming up. But tonight we are going to talk about a few other things. So the main thing is that there's recently of course the entire world has been consumed with the sad news of the loss of Barbara Ehrenreich. Also some old rich lady in the UK died, so there was that. Yeah, I don't know. I saw something about it. But before we go to either Ehrenreich or the UK, I want to talk about a couple of things that are closer to home. So one of them is something I wrote for Jacobin this week about John Fetterman. I think we have a graphic for that article. It's called John Fetterman is right about many things, but he is dead wrong on Palestine. The title, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Fetterman, has said a lot of things about Israel-Palestine that are pretty disappointing. They're pretty much the stuff that every American politician was saying 10 years ago, kind of literally with no exceptions. But it's a little disappointing because, there are certainly people in the squad and in Congress who have better positions on that. Some of them have been notoriously imperfect on it, AOC voting present on Iron Dome, etc. But, you have, Rashida Tlaib, who's actually Palestinian American, and Ilhan Omar, who's been very outspoken about it, and even AOC, she was conflicted, right? Which is better than what not only what's still the norm in Congress, but again was absolutely universal not very many years ago. And basically, I think that the reason it's worth writing stuff like this, and some people, we're not crazy about it. We have a tweet. We left off the name because it's just some guy. We don't need to shame him on the show. That's represented a one kind of reaction where this person, so is responding to David Griscom, who tweeted out important piece by Ben Burgis on Fetterman's disappointing position on Palestinian human rights. And they say important hit piece on Fetterman several weeks before doing battle with Dr. Oz with allies like this. Who needs enemies? And, throw to you guys on this, but basically my take on this is, look, I want to separate out a couple of different questions. If I were a Pennsylvania voter, would I vote for Fetterman over Oz? Yeah, of course I would. Right? Not a hard question. But I also don't work for the Fetterman campaign. If I was, if I was like hired to do PR for Fetterman, I've somehow forgotten that conversation, and none of the checks have cleared. I think, my primary interest, certainly when I write for Jacobin, what we do on this show is in promoting a larger socialist project that goes beyond what happens in any particular race, or even goes beyond electoral politics. And I do think that, Palestine solidarity in general, internationalism about foreign policy has to be a component of that. And in particular, I think it's a component that we have to, we have to be willing to give people a hard time about, because otherwise there's just very little incentive for people to have better positions on it. Because, for reasons that actually are not very complicated, right? Progressive voters are more likely to punish politicians for their domestic positions than the foreign policy ones, because, whether we're talking about, the oppression of Palestinians, or we're talking about, just our own direct war machine around the world, American voters' lives are much more affected by what happens with, domestic policy. That, whether, understandably, voters are thinking more about whether or not they're going to have health care than about who's going to be bombed in Gaza, or, who's going to be droned in Pakistan. And, I think there are ways, I talk about this at the end of the article, where we can kind of try to chip away at that by sort of making the argument at every possible opportunity that every dollar that's spent on those things is a dollar that's not spent on domestic social spending. But, that's trying to sort of shift the political landscape in a better direction on that as a long-term project. And fair enough. And I'm willing, I completely understand the calculation of people who are like, okay, somebody has a bad position on this, I'll vote for them anyway. I would make the same calculation, but also, like, I don't think we could start accepting, anytime there's an X number of months window before an election, you can't criticize these people about it, because I think before you know it, like, the wheel is always turning, guys. There's always something going on that people, it's like, oh my God, but they're about to have this big floor vote on blah, blah, blah. And, and you're criticizing this guy. Like, you just kind of have to be willing to do it on an ongoing basis and trust people to be adults who can make their own decisions.
Well, you also, Ben, you got to realize you got to vote blue no matter who. And then
thanks for that, Andy.
Next time he's up for election, primary him with somebody you like better.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I don't know. That's
can you before that primary, can you bring up their bad positions? Or,
no, you can't. You got to support them 100%.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'm less of a hardliner on this. I think if there was like a very, very compelling cause and effect here, where it really seemed like what you wrote here had a decent chance it would cause him to get any meaningfully less amount of share of the vote, then I think it would be an interesting judgment call, but it would be very hard to convince me of that. I mean, I think this is also measured criticism. If anything, if you're such a strong supporter of of Palestine that you weren't going to vote for Fetterman anyway, then maybe this would show you actually he has a lot of good opinions too. You know what I'm saying? It's a measured critique. And I think if we're not allowed to make measured critiques, then, I 100% agree with you. That said, I think if you said like, well, because of this one thing, no one should fucking vote for this guy, whatever, then I think that'd be, what that guy was saying. Sure. Or I'm assuming guy, because everyone on the internet is just some dude, right? But I'm assuming, I'm just saying, I don't think it's always immaterial to say, why are you critiquing this person? But I think that we just have to have a little bit of common sense. And this is a pretty measured critique. You're critiquing him on one issue. You're not even condemning him wholesale. So I agree with you that there's always going to be something, right?
Yeah. And it's also like, it's good to talk about this now. So when he does get into office, we can build a movement to push him into the right direction. So like there can be a group of constituents that can like sit in his office and fight him on the issue of Palestine.
Yeah, no, I think look, I certainly think without trying to comment, too much on the finer grained details of, what people should do strategically. Like, I just don't think that there's any kind of strategy for pushing these people in a better direction on this stuff that like involves spending months or possibly years shutting up about it, because, on the, even in situations like this, like Fetterman has been consistently for months, that like, it's like, no, like anything that has any chance of making a voter think more, badly of him, you can't say that. That kind of sounds to me like if you're editing yourself quite that much, I don't really believe that you have a strategy to ever do anything about this. Would be my take on this. Okay, I want to switch gears from Pennsylvania to Oklahoma, which is the state that I was writing about for the other Jacobin article this week. This actually just came out today. It's called "An Oklahoma Teacher Fought the Book Banning Right and Lost Her Job," and this is an absolutely insane story. So what happened here is that there's this English teacher, 10th grade English teacher in Norman, Oklahoma, who was reacting to HB 1775, which is Oklahoma's contribution to the national hysteria about critical race theory. It's a very typical anti-CRT bill, which is to say that parts of it just kind of redundantly re-outlaw things that were illegal already, right? You can't discriminate, etc., and just kind of take up space as text. But the part that actually matters is extremely vague, right? That basically it says there are all these concepts that you can't, have anywhere in a classroom, but, and the concepts are like white people should feel guilty and, stuff like that. And of course, assuming that nobody in, the Norman, Oklahoma school district was actually starting their day of class, history or social studies with just, I really hope those of you children who are white are feeling really guilty right now. I really doubt those words ever came out of anybody's mouth.
I mean, that's how I wake up my children.
Hey.
Whichever of my kids are white, which I don't want to make any assumptions, but I hope you're feeling incredibly guilty.
Exactly.
So 2 children and 1 cat get the guilt trip every single morning. The white cat.
Oh, you have a white cat. Okay.
Yeah.
I think most Jewish members of our audience have experienced this at some point. Just immediate guilt, waking up to immediate guilt.
Yes.
Good question.
You
don't even want to know.
Yeah. Let's not even get into it. Now, that's bad. What's worse is that the Norman School District before the beginning of the school year, issued guidance saying that teachers should review all texts to make sure that they're not in conflict with HB 1775. Now, what it would mean for a text to be in conflict with this law is anybody's guess. I don't know. I mean, like I've I guess you could just take a focus group of white people through the library and see which books make them feel guilty. But I have no idea what the plan was. But in any case, this English teacher in Norman, Summer Boismere, I believe, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, had in the lead up. So at the beginning of the year, she was like, pretty horrified by this like guidance to review all texts to make sure that they don't, that they're not, somehow, preaching the concepts that are being outlawed by HB 1775. So she did something that strikes me, and granted, I didn't grow up in Oklahoma, but from what I can remember of high school English teachers, etc., as a very like banally typical high school English teacher kind of thing to do. And that's not an insult. It's just, I think English teachers are good. I think that they fulfill a good social role. This is part of it. Right. But she put up some red paper signs in her classroom with like pictures of books. And I think they included pictures of books, but they said, these are the books the state doesn't want you to read. and they had a QR code to something called Books Unbanned, which was an initiative of the Brooklyn Public Library in response to book banning efforts across the country, where basically the Brooklyn Public Library is doing this program where if you're a teenager far from Brooklyn, right, for example, in Norman, Oklahoma, you can apply for an online library card so you can read whatever the hell you want on the Brooklyn Public Library website. And in response to this, Summer was placed on leave while they investigated whether she had violated HB 1775. And while on leave, she met with administrators, and she decided that, what they, like, if she wasn't allowed to help kids get library cards, that this didn't sound like in, circumstances that she wanted to work in. And so she resigned, at which point you would think that that would be the end of it. Right? The censors got what they wanted. But not so much. One of the things that is going on right now is that you have this guy, Ryan Walters, who's the Secretary of Education in Oklahoma, who has been repeatedly publicly advocating that Summer Boismer lose her teaching license so she can never get another teaching job again. This is a letter that he issued to the State Board of Education. He posted on his Twitter where he accuses her of wanting to engage in liberal indoctrination of her students. He accuses her of trying to sexualize the classroom. I guess the idea is that there's stuff on the Brooklyn that you can check out an ebook of on the Brooklyn Public Library website that would have some sort of sexual content. I know there's a book that a lot of these people are super obsessed with called Genderqueer, although if you actually read that thing, there's like very little sex in there. But and I posted about this, and I had somebody in the replies being like, well, would it be okay if she gave them a link to Pornhub? I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. I think Pornhub and the Brooklyn Public Library are pretty different websites. I'm not sure that's a tight analogy. But in any case, if you look at this dude again, I remind you, this is the Secretary of Education for the state of Oklahoma. If you look at his website, here's the sexualizing, this Twitter feed, right? Here's the sexualizing accusation, updated letter. Here's one. He has Oklahoma will end indoctrination.
And it doesn't matter the political belief. There's a lot of people out talking right now about the teacher at Norman Public Schools. And it doesn't matter the political beliefs of a teacher. It doesn't matter the opinions of a teacher. What matters is that teachers don't indoctrinate our kids. We are not going to allow teachers in the state of Oklahoma to put pornography in front of kids, to push a left-wing ideology to our kids, period. It's not going to happen here. This teacher shouldn't be teaching anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. This teacher should not have a teaching certificate in the state of Oklahoma, since she chose to knowingly and admit publicly that she wants to violate state law that doesn't allow for indoctrination. In the state of Oklahoma, we're going to make sure our kids know how to read. We're going to make sure our kids know science, our kids know history, minus any kind of political indoctrination. And so we are going to continue to uphold the law in the state of Oklahoma, and we're going to continue to make sure our best and brightest teachers are supported in the classroom. The reality is a good teacher doesn't want to indoctrinate kids. I've never met a good teacher that wants to indoctrinate kids. Good teachers want to equip students with academic value so that they can go on to be successful adults. And I know that's what the teachers in the state of Oklahoma want to do. So we're going to continue to ensure that there's no indoctrination in the classroom and that we do not have any teachers that are pushing that kind of indoctrination.
That is not the only video he's posted of himself ranting about this one English teacher in Norman, Oklahoma. This is the state Secretary of Education. And yes, Also, I like the fact that one's in the car. That's a very classic style of right-wing video. The guy, like, I feel like that was big in the late Obama era. The guy in the car truck, who's just like delivering a political rant into his phone. But she's also, apparently there have been attempts to dox her, and she's gotten threats, and for at least a few days there, she wasn't sleeping in her apartment because she was concerned about that. And that I guess the larger point here, beyond the fact that I don't actually think that like helping teenagers get library cards is equivalent to giving them pornography or trying to indoctrinate them or whatever else he said. And in fact, my suspicion is that probably more of them already knew about Pornhub than had library cards. I might be wrong about that. That's just an addition. But the larger point here is like, this is just kind of one of those reality check moments where we're told many, many times. I feel like I have been told many, many times by many, many people that a certain kind of story about free speech and conformity and all that stuff in the contemporary United States that goes something like this. Well, there was a time when progressives were like the countercultural types, and right-wingers were into censorship and conformity. But now, see, that's reversed itself. I've heard that from conservatives themselves. I've heard it from, let's say, the kind of commentators who either would deny having a political ideology, or who start every few sentences with "I'm a liberal, but," right? I feel like a lot of those guys tell some version of the story. Look, I wouldn't deny that there are good criticisms to make on free speech issues of many liberals, even some leftists. I'm happy to have those arguments about, social media censorship, etc. But like, I think there are a lot of things you could say about a political faction that are willing to push an English teacher out of her job, have state level officials relentlessly demonize her, etc., because she tried to help kids who might want to read banned books get borrowing cards at a public library. But I don't think you can really say with a straight face that these people are into free speech.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember I was actually very disappointed because a book that I worked on wasn't on the list, but Texas state senator put out a list of 400 books that should be banned. And I'm proud to say that like several of my friends have books on there, but my book is not. So please ban APB, Artists Against Police Brutality, from Rosarian Press. Get on that, people. It's gonna trigger somebody. But yeah, so get me on the banned book list. That's what I'm saying.
Here's we'll start that campaign tonight. But here's my question, and I kind of mean it in earnest, actually, although I'm pessimistic. For all of those right-wing commentators that fashion themselves as champions of free speech, how many are focusing on issues like these, which I think that when you look at, issues of free speech, and you have, a book like Fahrenheit 451 or something like this, like, banning books is pretty much the classic, right? I think that, tweeting at somebody, nobody buy this person's comedy special because they suck, listen, I find that behavior annoying a lot of the time, but I think that if you want to go real classic, curbing freedom of speech, banning books is it, right? So are there any conservatives that are willing to take this on, is my question. Have we seen
I would be fascinated to know the answer to that question. I'm skeptical, right? I mean, I think maybe like Fire, I could imagine them being like actually sometimes being consistent about stuff like this. Maybe like Reason, if you consider them to be conservatives, exactly. But like, I think there is exactly zero chance that anybody that we would think of as a big conservative pundit says anything about this, at least in the right direction, right? That they that like I think 100% of them either ignore it or maybe a few come out on the wrong side of it, but I think none of them actually, because no, they're not going to do that, right? They're not going to chide some, it's like what did Nixon say? If you really want something done, find yourself a what was his phrase? A right-wing enthusiast, right? Like they're not going to chide people for being good right-wing enthusiasts. They're not going to scold the MAGA faithful in Oklahoma for doing this to some like liberal teacher who like probably like checks all kinds of boxes that they hate. So no, I think there's zero chance of that, and I think that's the thing. I mean, if you're just supporting free speech for people you agree with, that's not much. Everybody agrees with that, right? Like, there's nobody in the world who doesn't support, everybody's right to say things that they agree with.
Oh, exactly. Which is why, we should ban my book.
except Andy. Andy actually doesn't support his own right. He's hoping that his speech will be banned immediately for the cred.
Yeah. For the crime of saying that, police brutality is bad.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, while we were on, and I saw somebody a while ago, I can't find the chat anymore, was asking about the LA Live show. More about that's going to be posted, is going to be on the show certainly when we get closer to it. Given the combination of people there, there's Bessner, right? Daniel Bessner and Varn and Deep State Cuba. So I'd imagine there's going to be some foreign policy talk, but although also it's a live show, right? I mean, it's nobody's going to be sitting down for a 3-hour, panel discussion. Probably keep it a little bit lighter than that, but I would imagine that's going to come up. I would, it's Jason from This Is Revolution is one of the main organizers. So if you kind of know the things they talk about all the time on This Is Revolution, with regard to race, class, and all that, I would expect that to come up. I have,
this is the one you're talking about?
Yeah, this is the one I'm talking about. Yep. I don't know. Anna's there. I think that I think it's not out of the question. That if we could get her talking about her debate last year with Ben Shapiro, that sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know if we're gonna have a good way of doing clips in the Telegram, or about her former Young Turks coworker Dave Rubin. That one's always fun. But yeah, I think as far as like specific content goes, we're still a good month and a half out, right? So it's it'll be nailed down a lot closer. But but also like just I think these are just always a very good time, right? I mean, I went to 2 of the Michael Brooks show ones, one just as a audience member and one on stage, and they were both a blast, right? You can find those on YouTube. And they covered all kinds of different subjects, but I mean, just there's something about the atmosphere of that's just really, really different, and is a lot of fun, and the audience interaction and all that stuff, and yeah, it should be it should be really good, and yeah, I actually, you have me beat there. I haven't been to the venue, but I've heard good things about it. So yeah, really looking forward to that. But we had just been talking about free speech, and with that, let's hop across the pond before we start the main event about Ehrenreich, and look at this video.
Disgusting! Wait, I've done nothing wrong.
So, Andy, you're the one who brought that clip to our attention. You want to give us a little context about what's going on there?
Yeah, well, basically, this guy was just saying what we're all thinking about Prince Andrew. Not the best Andrew. England does not say they're best Andrews. Yeah, no, and so this kid saying what everybody else is. There's tons. If you go on YouTube, you can actually see like a bunch of people just talking about how gross Prince Andrew is every time he shows up on TV, and somebody's like filming like their family sitting around the telly, because it's more of an event in England because the way tax structure works.
We should say specifically Prince Andrew for anybody who didn't have the unhealthy fixation with Jeffrey Epstein news developments that some of us may have had. That this guy was. I know that libel laws in England make it very easy to sue people. So let's just put this delicately and say that he made many trips to Pedophile Island, and various things were alleged about what he did there. And perhaps he just went to Pedophile Island for the scenery, not the pedophilia. But
and he couldn't sweat, so it was a serious medical condition he has.
Yeah, this was infamously his defense in an interview, that like he said that this specific report about him actually doing what everybody was doing on Epstein Island couldn't be true, because the girl was describing him sweating, and he actually has this medical condition where he can't sweat. And I think during the interview he was actually sweating, and it's like, I guess he got over it, but at that time he had the no sweating, the no sweating.
Very Monty Python, She turned me into a newt. I got better,
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that over again.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, when we watched this just before the show started, we were getting together clips and stuff, and I may have in a loose moment referred to England as a North Korea-esque country where people had little enough self-respect they could say shit like "God save the king." And if so, I certainly regret and apologize for saying that, and I will do better. But it is pretty bad. So we have a tweet that will honestly, I tend to regard the existence of this tweet as pretty definitive proof of the non-existence of God. This is from the UK Labour Party, Twitter account. God save the King, His Majesty, King Charles III. The last leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, notoriously was an anti-monarchist. I believe there was some stupid little mini scandal about him refusing to sing "God Save the Queen." But don't worry, Keir Starmer, who's running the place now, is more than willing to go out of his way to signal his loyalty to His Majesty, King Charles. King Charles I,
The third.
King Charles III. King Charles I was the one who was beheaded in the 1640s, which I bring up for no particular reason, but this is
goals.
This is not that.
Goals.
This is not that Charles. This is a new and different Charles. And I think that that this Charles, he was just crowned. He just gave his first stupid little speech as the king. And in that context, let me just find it right here. There was, here we go. So this has been a Griscom heavy episode. This tweet from him is also there we go. So this is King Charles III getting ready to make a speech. There's a little ink well there, and apparently royal children are not taught how to do this. Right? But like, let me see. So like here, my this phone, you see how it's like here, and I'm picking it up and moving it off to the side. That's a skill that members of the royal family don't have, right? So that's why he's doing it.
Hey Ben, I'm sorry, Ben, that I wasn't there to move that for you. I know normally that falls under the producer role. It's just moving small items.
If you were there, I would have insisted that you move the phone, and I would have indicated it like.
Yeah.
And to think this guy's idea of sexy talk is wanting to be his girlfriend's tampon.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep. That was
whatever that is, I support more than whatever this is. he can fantasize about whatever he wants to, but
yeah, not going to kick shame, but I'm definitely going to shame him for whatever's going on there. And so there is one. I think there are 2.5 slightly serious things to say here. One, and I said a lot of this in an article I did last year for Jacobin. It was when all the Harry and Meghan stuff was going on, which a lot of American conservatives reacted to the Harry and Meghan stuff by issuing these like blistering defenses of how wonderful the British monarchy is and how much they love it, which is a little funny just because, like, I don't know. I thought American conservatives were supposed to be all about 1776 and George Washington, etc. And maybe my American history is a little rusty there, but I think there might be some tension between that and loving the British monarchy as an institution. I don't know. Maybe there's a way of working that out. But in that article, I was cribbing a bunch from a book that Christopher Hitchens wrote that came out in 1990 called The Monarchy, a critique of Britain's favorite fetish. And, basically making 2 points on this, right? One is people love to say, well, it's okay, right, that that the UK still has kings and queens because who have done absolutely nothing except for to win the genetic lottery by being born into that family to have this role in the British state. Because don't worry, they don't exercise any power. It's just symbolic. And I'd say 2 things about that. One, okay, really? Like, Jake, somebody tells you starting tomorrow, every week, President Biden is going to have an audience with you. You're going to be told all sorts of state secrets. If you, in some incredibly subtle way, make it clear or it's being whispered that you're displeased with the president, that's going to be a major political news story. Oh, and you can also provoke a constitutional crisis anytime you want by threatening to withhold your assent from laws. But, you probably wouldn't do that because that would threaten the institution. Would that be a decrease, an increase, or about as much political power as you hold right now?
I think it's a lateral move for me.
It's a lateral move, yeah.
Yeah. No, I deserve. I do think I deserve that, and I have the elegance and eloquence.
Being a union boss does give you certain benefits.
Yeah, and I was, similarly elegant to Queen Liz, unlike Prince Charles with his, remember that picture of his fingers? Why are his fingers always
swollen?
Yeah, and he's just
they look like little hot dogs from.
Maybe, yeah. Sorry, now I'm shaming him for the wrong thing again. Let's stick to what we're talking about. Yes, that would be an increase in my power.
Yeah, I tend to think so. So that's one point. And then the other point is, okay, let's say that, let's just go with this for the sake of argument and say that it is purely symbolic, right? That there's essentially no political power being wielded, just a little bit. But, basically it's just symbolic. Okay, great. Symbolic of what? Right? What's it a symbol of? The history of the British monarchy, up before the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, where it did start to have less political power. I mean, if you think that's something to celebrate, I guess it could be that.
No, don't worry. Hitler Jr. is only a figurehead at the head of the German state. It has nothing to do with
anything Hitler did.
Yeah, just his son, and we honor his lineage. It's just
Yeah, it's not like Japan, where like Hirohito was emperor until 1989, which still blows my mind.
Yeah. And, I think if you start thinking about the things that it's symbolic of, it gets a little bit easier to understand how American conservatives, who again, theoretically should hate the British monarchy, given that, the iconography of American patriotism is all about the struggle against it, somehow love this institution, right? Here's this is one of the finest minds on the American right, Laura Ingraham. Oh no.
Her brain is loading.
Okay, yeah. Well, while Laura's brain loads, let's just say here, maybe we can here. All right, I was gonna try to get this from a little bit later on, but we might have to watch more of Laura's insights than I was hoping we would.
What Christine Blasey Ford did
And has therefore.
What is the most gutsy thing you've done recently, both of you?
Well, I have to say, doing that series and getting way outside my comfort zone. I did everything from try to learn to tango, which, believe me, is not easy, to making acorn soup.
Dancing and soup? Very gutsy. What sacrifice, what courage, Hillary. But that's not all, folks, because don't forget, the gutsiest thing of all is hating Trump.
Our former president really not only mainstream, but mainline hate in our country. So it was really important to us to include gutsy women standing up to hate, standing up to white supremacy, standing up to bigotry in their own lives, in their communities, and for our country, because I think we all need to be doing that right now.
No, right now, Chelsea, what we need to be doing is recognizing and celebrating the gutsiest and most courageous woman probably the last 100 years. And that's the woman you failed to even mention in your silly little book, Queen Elizabeth II. Now that was a gutsy woman. Because gutsy is someone who somehow, even at a young age, sets a dignified example for others to follow.
We are trying to do all we can to help our gallant sailors, soldiers, and airmen. And we are trying, too, to bear our own share of the danger and sadness.
This is getting me so fucking fired up.
Remember,
I'm ready to run through a wall for this woman.
a better and happier place.
Gutsy is putting duty first, putting your fellow countrymen ahead of even your own personal desires.
I have, in sincerity, pledged
the fucking
myself
yacht
to
that
your
she
service,
wanted.
as so many of you are pledged to mine. Throughout all my life, and with all my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your trust.
And gutsy is carrying on with time-honored traditions when so many in modern society are rejecting them and ridiculing them.
Visits by American presidents always remind us of the close and long-standing friendship between the United Kingdom and the United States. And I'm so glad that we have another opportunity to demonstrate the immense importance that both our countries attach to our relationship.
When we understand what the monarchy is, and it really is this deeply colonial role, and not just in the past, but now. I mean, the fact that we take this really white family to represent what Britain is, just tells you that this is a kind of hangover to the colonial time.
Oh, really? Gutsy is standing resolute and stoic in times of great national change and challenge, as she's done since 1953.
I cannot lead you into battle.
Oh, really?
I do not give you laws
She got
or
him.
administer justice.
but I
Remember
can
when
do
Ben,
something else.
when you owned Charlie
I
Kirk,
can give
when you
you
went,
my heart.
oh really?
And my devotion to these old islands and to all the peoples of our brotherhood of nations.
Now, Queen Elizabeth's kind of grit and determination and courage, gutsiness, it's kind of considered passé in much of today's modern world. And it's a world where so many expect a trophy for being their authentic selves. A world where people fret and navel gaze about work-life balance or worry about whether they have enough hours in their schedule for self-care and me time. Queen Elizabeth loved her dogs and her horses and her family, but she also loved her country. She wouldn't think of casting aspersions on her country or criticizing her nation publicly like so many Democrat leaders today do so readily. Elizabeth knew what was expected of her.
Laura
and
doesn't
fulfilled her
criticize
duties.
America.
And she did so brilliantly, decade after decade after decade.
We're never going to see another like her.
It is truly the end of an era. But we can hope that Britain and the rest of the world,
Is that the same picture with the
even
dogs
Hillary
again?
Clinton, learn something about real guts, real courage, and real service from her example.
Yeah. Awesome.
I hate you, Ben, today. You are.
The thing is, I wish they didn't reuse that picture of the dogs, because Queen Elizabeth owned all the dolphins in England. Why are there no pictures of the Queen and her dolphins?
Yeah, even beyond her awesome refutation of the idea that the British monarchy has something to do with colonialism, which consisted of 3 syllables. Oh, really? Which, because you could say that's ancient history, not very ancient. The decolonization process was still very much ongoing when Queen Elizabeth took the crown, even if we're talking about distant colonies. And closer to home, this is the Queen who pinned the medal on the lieutenant colonel who commanded the paratroopers on Bloody Sunday in Northern Ireland. So, if you're going to, if you're going to talk about time-honored traditions, it seems like you can't completely ignore the bad stuff that happened. But also, and just parenthetically, I fucking love the idea that Queen Elizabeth was the most courageous woman who lived in the last 100 years.
She was the Rosa Parks of old white women.
Yeah. Rosa Parks, for example, strikes me as somebody who displayed more courage than Queen Elizabeth did in her lifetime of giving speeches and cutting ribbons.
I was just cracking up at imagining people listening to her talk and in that posh ass voice and being like, I'm going to run through a wall for this woman. I'm about to storm Normandy or whatever. I'm sure at the time.
Sailors and airmen.
Fuck yeah, let's go. It's just I get at the time it probably fired some people up, but come on, now they're playing that as if it was just so inspiring.
What a good job. So it's no Rosa Parks, no my God, just all of the random female Red Army snipers during World War II who would you see one of these people dying at the age of 120. They always there's stuff that goes around on social media, Katharina whatever, who personally shot 900 German officers. It's no, much less courageous than Queen Elizabeth for giving a bunch of speeches to adoring crowds. So that's an awesome claim in itself. But I think that and actually to bring us to Barbara Ehrenreich, I think that I think honestly just random nameless women who just go to work in horrible jobs and have horrible face horrible conditions unironically do display more personal courage on a daily basis than is asked of you for being the symbolic mascot of, which is what a king or a queen is, right? If it's a symbol, what is it ultimately a symbol of? It's a symbol of inherent privilege. By its essence, that's what it's a symbol of. And yeah, it's a weird, disturbing institution. It's it's also very disturbing to see, we watched the video earlier. There was I think we also have a graphic of an article about this, of various incidents as the funeral, the coronation, etc., all that stuff was going on, of stuff like this: woman arrested after holding abolish monarchy sign in Edinburgh. I guess, to be fair, it also says "fuck imperialism" on it, but so if that's an arresting offense in the UK, that you used a bad word on your protest sign. But that's obviously very disturbing on free speech grounds.
Bugger. It would have gone over much better if she said "bugger imperialism."
Yeah. So all of that is what it is. I think it's a fairly grotesque spectacle, but like, whatever. I'm not going to lose that much sleep over it. I am a little bit bothered by Americans who love this people as much as Laura Ingraham does. Like, again, why? Right? It's not, this isn't even your national stupidity. It's somebody else's national stupidity that you've fallen in love with. And, it seems like all the reasons that we're not crazy about it, I mean, that it's ultimately a symbol of inherited power and privilege, inequality, colonialism, all that stuff. I'm pretty sure that's why Laura Ingraham is into it. Anyway, with that, it is Ehrenreich time. So we are going to play this. We had to, the time didn't quite work out for Micah to come on live, so we had to pre-record this a few hours ago. You can see me wearing the shirt that I was working out in, and drinking coffee. So these are signs that we've gone back in time from where we are right now. But it is a really good interview about the late great Barbara Ehrenreich with the deputy editor of Jacobin magazine, Micah Uetricht. All right, I am now joined by Micah Uetricht from Jacobin magazine. How you doing, Micah?
I'm good. How are you?
I am, but otherwise, I'm all right.
Are you talking about Barbara Ehrenreich?
Yes, exactly. So let's do that. Let's actually talk about Barbara Ehrenreich out of the two celebrity deaths in the last week. That's a week or two. That is definitely the one that's gotten less attention and should get more. So yeah, I think a lot of people, if they know anything about her, right? I think probably my guess is that people who know like one thing about Barbara Ehrenreich probably know that she wrote this book, Nickel and Dimed, about trying to about what it's like to work at minimum wage jobs, and at least that's my guess. I remember like when I used to teach composition classes at Miami-Dade College, the reader they used for that included an extract from that book. So I think that gets around a fair amount in the mainstream. People who are maybe on the left might know that she's a democratic socialist, that she was a early DSA person, might know that she was canceled over nonsense on Twitter a few years ago, but and maybe people who know a decent amount about her would know that she's one of the originators of the phrase professional managerial class, which has gotten a lot of play since, but that's not actually very many things. So let's see if we can expand on that. What's a good entry point to who Barbara Ehrenreich was?
Well, I would say that actually is quite a few things. The problem is that Barbara Ehrenreich did so much in her lifetime, both in her written work and elsewhere, that it's sort of difficult to say in like one quick sentence what Barbara Ehrenreich was all about. But to me, the most important thing about her, from my perspective, is that she was the greatest popularizer of socialist ideas in the of the new, at least of anyone to come out of the new left generation. She, you know, when she was alive, she was the greatest living popularizer of socialist ideas in America. And that in itself is something that is not often, I mean, that name, the label socialist is not something that comes up. I mean, people might mention that she, you know, was a vice chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, for example, but not really recognize that her output as a writer was always in service of socialist ideals, socialist feminist ideals, a wide, you know, fighting racism, fighting all of the for all the progressive values that we all believe in as socialists. But fundamentally, she was a socialist. She was one of us. In addition to that label, she was a sort of popularizer of discussing economic inequality. Of course, that's what Nickel and Dimed was all about. Nickel and Dimed, however many years later after she wrote it, still plays this really crucial role in introducing lots of young people to economic inequality. Although I think these days we don't need a single text like that as much, given how awful economic inequality has gotten and the rise of Bernie Sanders and everything else. So people are a little more aware of that. But that book still plays a really central role in introducing people to the state of economic inequality in the United States. It served that role for me, at least partially, not as an introduction, but as like one of the essential texts when I was a freshman sociology student at Aquinas College, our shared, not alma mater for me, but a school that I attended, a school that we both attended. And it was really transformational for me in sort of making economic inequality, I would say, one of the most central things that I thought about for the rest of my life up to this point. But then also there's this wide range of work that it gets forgotten about because there's so much other stuff that she did. A book like Blood Rights, which came out not super long ago, or a book like Dancing in the Streets, my favorite Barbara Ehrenreich book. Both of those books are these incredibly wide-ranging books that cover all of human history, basically. I mean, they sort of start at the beginning of human history and work their way to present through discussions about, in the case of Blood Rights, war and ritual sacrifices, and she's sort of doing a synthesis of much of the anthropological literature on these things. The same is true Dancing in the Streets. She does the same thing for collective expressions of joy. So there's, you know, I could go on and on and on. I've already been talking for like 5 minutes. There's so many other things that she did. I mean, at the beginning of her career, her very first book was about the student movement in the New Left. She did multiple books with Deidre English about women's knowledge and how much of modern science and medicine sort of squashes the knowledge that women have brought to healing over time. You know, there's a million other things that you could point to. If you read, for example, her essay collection, The Worst Years of Our Lives, she was just like a merciless critic of the Reagan administration as a leftist, you know, critique of their anti-welfare state policies, their brutal austerity policies. I mean, she was in mainstream outlets like the New York Times, you know, waging war against what the Reagan administration was up to. So just truly an incredibly original and wide-ranging thinker who, you know, if you read any of the books that we've mentioned so far, it would have been enough for her life's work to have written a book like Nickel and Dime that really changed the way that we talk about economic inequality in this country. But she also had such a wider range of things that she brought this incredibly original and incredibly productive mind to. And as I said at the beginning, she's a socialist. She's one of us. And so it's a real blow to lose what I consider to be certainly one of the great leftist public intellectuals of post-war America.
Yeah. So one interesting thread to pick on from that is that, you know, you started talking about the new left and that she does come out of that which, you know, in some ways it's a little odd with the emphasis on material concerns and economic inequality because you know, I think that's not at least what we usually remember, the New Left for, and a lot of how you sort of implicitly contrast it to the old left is that it's based out of campuses and stuff like that. But she was, she did come out of the New Left. In fact, little far left trivia, when DSA was first founded, that was a merger of the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee, which was the Michael Harrington thing, which had come out of the Socialist Party and had these sort of old left roots, and the one that Barbara Ehrenreich was involved in, which was NAM, the new American movement, which I know, was like came out of like had a lineage that's like more goes back to like SDS and stuff like that. So can you talk a little bit about her sort of roots in the New Left and her maybe kind of like early political activity, at the beginning of the story?
Sure. I'm far from an expert on this. I'll say that the two best things I've read that go into some of these details are Gabriel Winant's recent piece in N+1 on Barbara Ehrenreich, and then Alex Press, Jacobin staff writer, did a long interview with her in Dissent magazine in 2019, focused mostly on the professional managerial class, but also talking about some of her roots in the New Left. But yeah, she came out. She was radicalized in the 60s and came out of the New Left, and she brought that sensibility to, I would say, like the NAM sensibility, one that came more out of student groups like SDS. She brought that to her work. She was she managed to both write a lot about economic inequality. That was one of her central life focuses, but she also was somebody who was a pioneering socialist feminist. She wrote a text on socialist feminism that we reprinted a few years ago in Jacobin, that she wrote a new introduction for. A book like The Hearts of Men, which I just read over the weekend after started reading after hearing about her death, is an incredibly original, pioneering book about the as the subtitle says, the flight from commitment. The sort of, she was writing it in the 80s at a time when people were getting divorced more often, when there was seen to be this crisis in heterosexual marriage in America. And she talks at great length about how marriage in the United States has been a largely economic arrangement and one that actually women need more than men, because women are expected not to be the breadwinners, were expected not to be the breadwinners for much of the 20th century. And she sort of talks about how that transformation happened. And it's a sort of brilliant book that takes seriously gender inequality, takes seriously how economic inequality and capitalism affect women differently than do men, but then also does so in a way that's somewhat sympathetic to men. I mean, she doesn't take this kind of stance towards men, screw all of these douchebag dudes who are making my life miserable. I mean, she writes throughout her work with a kind of sympathy towards men, or towards, in other works, the white working class, which she talks a little bit about in Alex Press's interview. She is not someone who, despite the sort of burning rage that she had towards inequality of all kinds in America and around the world, translated that rage into a kind of blanket condemnation of men. She saw that men, or that white working class men, or the white working class in general, she saw like masses of people as the agents for us to transform the world. And so if you believe that, then you can't just say screw all men, screw all these white workers, screw any class of people who may indeed be perpetuating various kinds of oppression, but need to be the ones who are at the center of transforming the world. And she brought that sensibility to that kind of writing, which is, in my opinion, something that's really missing in a lot of today's left analysis. But your original question was about her political roots. I think that part of what made her, I mean, she obviously was born with a very special, gifted mind that had an ability to write on a range of topics that most people can't. but she also was rooted in social movements, and her intellectual work came out of those social movement commitments. And to me, that's something that's essential. That is also true of other towering left figures of her vintage, like Mike Davis, people who are writers who write wildly original and compelling books, but like fundamentally, they were not shaped by their experiences in a college classroom as much as they were, or in duking it out in the pages of prestigious magazines, as much as they were in their ironclad commitments to social movements. And I think that is a lesson for many, left intellectuals or aspiring left intellectuals today.
Yeah, definitely. And so I do want to pick up on what you said about socialist feminism in a minute, but I think one thing that's worth worth emphasizing here is that even though she's somebody who's I think best known, and rightly, for sort of emphasis on domestic like social inequality, in the United States, is somebody who did have lifelong internationalist commitments in ways that make a lot of sense, given those new left roots. That, in fact, I believe, from remembering right in that Alex Press interview, she says something like that, like she was initially a little skeptical about the merger that formed DSA because she with those sort of new left roots, right? She was like, she was concerned that like Harrington and DSOC were too influenced by sort of kind of soft social democratic version of like liberal anti-communism, and wouldn't weren't like sufficiently hostile to American empire. So I mean, I think that's. I don't really have anything to do with that, but I think that is worth finding somewhere to slot into all of this. That it is also very much a global vision.
Yeah, and that vision, in addition to her anti-war commitments, extended to the international working class. I remember reading her book. I think she edited "Global Woman" in an undergraduate class that was about female factory workers around the world. Or she's also wrote a lot about domestic workers. I mean, she's those kinds of commitments were central to her work as well. I mean, she had no kind of chauvinistic, narrowly American vision of who we should be focusing on liberating. It was not just confined to the United States.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're talking about the, female factory workers around the world. So, that is a good way to bring us back to socialist feminism. So, what's, I mean, I guess maybe just kind of a simple-minded way of starting to talk about that would be like, okay, so beyond just sort of like what is that combination of words mean besides like socialism is good, feminism is also good, be both of those things, right? I mean, like on a sort of what's the like what's different about feminism if it's socialist?
I think there is, and this is me just speaking on my own definition of this, not for Barbara, but there's a way of talking about feminism in the United States in particular that almost seems to suggest that what we need is incredible self-exertion, a kind of voluntaristic self-exertion on the part of either women, to advocate for themselves, or for men to change their, piggish, chauvinistic behavior, and that is sort of at the core of the vision. It's like recognize that for men, your behavior is immoral and needs to change, and so do better. And the sort of liberal version of this for women is like lean in harder, right? Like lean in is all. The whole phrase is like all about this sort of individual voluntaristic self-exertion. And of course, there's some need to engage in that kind of. I mean, people do need to gross misogynistic men should probably like reflect on why they're misogynist and should make individual exertions to change their behavior. I would never argue against that. I don't think anybody would. But that can't be all that there is to feminism. I mean, and in the book, like The Hearts of Men, she points out, she has this great chapter on talking about right-wing women like Phyllis Schlafly, who were fighting the Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s and especially in the 80s. And she talks about how the entire campaign for the ERA was a sort of, it's about this law that would mandate gender equality in America. But when you're mandating that in a country where there is a tattered welfare state and where women are still in enormous numbers reliant on essentially a man to provide like a welfare state within one home through the provision of the breadwinner wage. A lot of women saw that call for equality. They saw the call for people to enter the workplace, but they did not have any kind of like concomitant welfare state that could support them in doing such a thing. And so the call was just for that kind of women's exertion. Go leave the home and join the workforce. But women like rightly understood that it's a brutal world out there. The capitalist America is not a great place for workers of any kind, much less women workers in particular. So a socialist feminism insists that it's not the problem with women who are housewives who are at home. It's a Betty Friedan type critique. It's not just that they are stuck at home under the thumb of an individual male autocrat that they need to try to liberate themselves from, although that certainly might be the case. But they're also in a society that doesn't care about providing for them and has outsourced that work to that male autocrat in the home. And so if you really want to liberate women, you can't just sort of wag your finger at them and say, go liberate yourself, go free yourself, go be a woman out in the world who works and is free. You need to say, no, there need to be social welfare policies to support women to be able to do this. I mean, one of my favorite essays of all time, which I would have loved to know what Barbara Ehrenreich thought about it, is also in Dissent magazine, and it's called Cockblocked by Social Democracy, which maybe you've read before, Ben, I don't know. And it is about pickup artists who go to some of the European social democracies like Denmark, and they pickup artists, these awful misogynist men who try to have sex with as many women as possible, try to trick women into sleeping with them, basically. And so this guy is writing this worldwide book series about convincing women to have sex with them all over the world. And he's like, don't go to Denmark, because these Danish women are like, they're not desperate enough for my tricks to work on them, because essentially you find out through the course of the essay, because they have a social welfare state that does not make them reliant on men. And so, his part of his whole thing that he can sort of sell to women is like, hey, like I'm a man and I'm suave, I look cool or whatever, but I also like, men have the goods that you need. Men have the finances. We have the money that we can support you with. But if you're in a country like Denmark where women have a robust social safety net, it has the effect of transforming women's mental conceptions of they look at a gross dude and they don't see somebody who could potentially support them in a society that has no public supports for them. They just see the gross misogynistic dude and they're like, I'm not going to have sex with you. Are you kidding me? You're disgusting. Why would I do that? So like, to me, that is the kind of the orientation of social feminism. Not to say that there's no gender inequality, obviously that's absurd, but to say that the way to fix our problems, the gender inequality in America and around the world, is not simply through that kind of individual exertion and changing of behavior, but actually creating a material base that can then open up room for both men and women's individual transformations when it comes to gender relations.
Yeah, right. So in the 50s, when the sort of traditional patriarchal family was strongest. Part of that was about actual legal limitations on women's rights and quasi-institutional ones, like being able to open up bank accounts and stuff like that. But the sort of foundation of it, right, was the economic dependency, that they get divorced, then what are you going to do, right? Which I don't know. I mean, I think it's like a simple point, but it's a really I think pretty profoundly important one. I mean, I was thinking about this because on last week's show, I was arguing with Sohrab Ahmari from Compact Magazine, and the point that I'd made, when in the article that I wrote when that magazine first launched, right, for Jacobin, which you titled, all credit to Micah, right-wing social was it right? So right-wing social democracy isn't going to happen. Stop trying to make it happen. The other way around. It's the Mean Girls quote. But anyway, but is that, like, one way of thinking, certainly a way that's very attractive to me, of thinking about the sort of core of what socialist politics is all about, is that people who are lack sufficient economic means to make their own independent decisions are liable to be dependent on others. That's the foundation of that's the foundation of the 1950s family model. It's also the foundation of capitalism in the workplace. And if what we really want, right, is not, I don't really, in a certain sense, right? I mean, there's a sense that I care, but like there's a certain sense which I don't really care very much what somebody thinks a good life is, right? I think they can sort of figure that out for themselves. But what I do care about is they have the economic support to live whatever kind of life that they want to live, right? So if you want to have if you want to have the family with 12 kids and you all go to mass together every week, then beautiful, do that, right? That's like all the best to you, right? But crucially, if you don't want to do that, right, you should be able to you should be able to not do that, right? I mean, that's in a way, it's like there's that line from John Stuart Mill about experiments in living, and the thing that I always think about is like, well, it's a little bit like telling physics grad students they can do whatever experiments they want if they can buy their own large hadron collider, right? It's like, right. It doesn't really do very much good to tell people they can live however they want if they don't actually have the material means to live however they want.
Right. Yes, and this is the core of the socialist feminist argument, also just the socialist argument in general, is that, and it's not that we don't care about other forms of oppression, sure, or just anything other than material stuff. It's that the material needs have to be met in order to fully allow everyone to be able to move on to that next step in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need to have your animal needs met before you can move on to other ones. And Barbara was the fiercest critic that we had when it came to the denial of the meeting of people's animal needs in this country, and was had that always in her scopes, and it makes me sad to think about her voice disappearing as one of the foremost critics of that kind of inequality, as well as the foremost writer on things like socialist feminism at a time where liberal feminism really still feels very dominant.
Yeah, for sure. Just switch gears just a little bit and just talk about Barbara Ehrenreich as a you mentioned you've just used the phrase her voice several times, like just as like a writer and a communicator of left ideas, because we talked a fair amount about what those ideas are, which is obviously very important and what was most important to her, but like also You know, I mean, I think also something that surely is significant about Barbara Ehrenreich that people should be thinking about, that, you know, learning from, certainly people who do what we do should be thinking about and learning from, is the just her ability to write about this stuff in ways that are, you know, compelling and interesting, and interesting to people who aren't steeped in the project, and at least in certain cases, you know, like at least some of those books, right, actually manage to find like a large and receptive mainstream audience.
Yeah, the first thing to say about her writing is that I can't think of any books or articles that does not involve, that she wrote, that does not involve some very high level of hilarity throughout the whole thing. She was a incredibly funny writer, and if you watch any of her speeches that she's given on YouTube, of which there are many, I was watching one about, I think about Brightsided the other day, and she's delivering lines like she's a stand-up comedian. She's a deeply funny person, and she understood that that is really central to getting people's attention and like bringing joy to the reading experience of her arguments. I mean, people are swayed by arguments not simply by whoever is making the most airtight intellectual case about a certain topic, but also by someone who brings them joy and pleasure in reading. I have been teaching a course on writing for organizers through the journal The Forge, and I assigned 2 of her essays in the class, and that's one of the things that the students talk about is how enjoyable her voice is and how funny she is. The essay "Welcome to Cancerland" in Harper's, which is about her experience with breast cancer, which ended up adapted in Brightsided, is a great example of that. She's like, you know, staring down death as she's getting treated for breast cancer, and she manages to be, you know, biting and hilarious the whole time. And so as a prose stylist, just fantastic. And she could do it in like an 800-word column in the New York Times or in Time magazine too. I mean, she was always funny. She also wrote in this personal way, which Gabe Winant in that N+1 piece points out, has, you know, that has the function of making the writing come alive more for her readers, who, you know, that's true of Nickel and Dime. I mean, if she had just written a like reported venture on what poverty was like in America for the working poor, it would not have hit the same if she hadn't gone through these experiences herself that she was writing about, which then also opens up very, you know, fascinating new vistas that she never. For example, there's a great line in Nickel and Dimed about where she's reflecting on the different types of, I believe it was fecal matter stains that she had to clean up, or like human waste stains that she had to clean up. And she's like writing about it, and she's like, well, for this kind of stain, you needed this kind of product. You know, sorry, reader, do you not want to hear about this? Well, you know, I didn't really want to learn about it, but I had to in this job because this was what the job was all about. So it has another line about like, yeah, I had to clean, you know, pubic hair out of people's drains in their bathrooms or in their hot tubs. I mean, all of these insights came to her because she worked these jobs themselves. So it made the work come alive for people. And, you know, at this point, online publishing in the 21st century, there was a period, especially I think a couple of years ago, where the personal essay really reigned supreme, and it got out of control. We like people, it almost felt like people were doing horribly embarrassing things to themselves just so that they could write about them or share their worst traumas to the world. And, you know, we sort of went off the deep end on that a little bit. But it is true that those kind of personal narratives are incredibly moving. I mean, I wrote a book review of Daisy Pitkin's union organizer memoir called On the Line. I reviewed it for the New Republic, and she's just talking about her own experiences as a union organizer, what it felt to be a union organizer, what it felt to throw her whole life in this fight against the boss. And the fact that it was a personal memoir added so much more punch to the prose. that made it an incredibly moving reading experience. So Barbara is she's a sort of one of the best sort of political memoirists, I would say, or political personal essayists that we've had, and we could learn a lot from her experience and how she wrote up those things. And one of the things that I sort of teach in my class, and I think I was sort of suggesting in that New Republic review, is that people who are involved in social change efforts, whether it's organizing a union, or even not even organizing a union, but just people who are working jobs in America, should take their experiences in those things seriously and write about them, reflect about them. We need people who are actually out in the world living with the consequences of economic and other kinds of inequality, writing about what that experience meant for them personally. You know, for my money, Barbara is about as good of a model for how you can do that, with weaving in personal details while also having, you know, always a sort of structural critique that it's grounded in.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking about a tweet I saw this morning from a Starbucks worker who's involved in organizing efforts, who said that they had woken up several times and over the course of the night and had anxiety vomited because they kept thinking about how Starbucks is, getting so blatant in their union busting efforts that they would that, like, if they clocked in 1 minute late, they're pretty sure that they're going to lose their job, because that would be like enough of an excuse for them to do that. And hope whoever the person who tweeted that actually writes that as a as an essay, right? I mean, that for example, like that sounds really compelling. Read that.
Yeah, and also that example that you just cited reminds me that Barbara was one of the greatest writers about the authoritarian nature of the contemporary American workplace. She would write about that constantly. It's not just that the decline of unions and the rise of inequality means that workers are making less, their benefits are worse. It's that there is a deep incursion into our personal lives in the space that is supposed to be ours. Like, we're already giving over so much of ourselves to the boss. We're already spending all of our time at work generating profit for them to take the lion's share of. So, as if that wasn't enough, the boss then has to engage in these kind of petty indignities every day. I think she talks in Nickel and Dime somewhere about as a quote that was shared widely, that the boss, when she was a waitress, made clear that her purse could be searched at any time, and she has a line something along the lines of, anytime a woman feels like her purse is subject to random search and seizure at any moment, leaves her feeling a couple buttons short of fully dressed. Right. So she talks about that, what the personal experience is to be on the brunt end of American austerity and American inequality, and again, that's something that we need a lot more of, because when you're talking about unionization rates, what percentage of workers are in unions, and you're looking at graphs where things are declining. I mean, all of that is important. That's the sort of top line stuff, but like. Appealing to average people on the basis of, like, we all say that we believe in democracy, and yet we go into the job and my democratic rights are violated every day. And this is how it happened to me at my waitress job or wherever, and this is how it made me feel. I think that's an incredibly powerful pitch for union organizing as a solution to the problems that ail us. There are deeply personal violations that the boss is making to you, and the solution to the personal violations is collective action.
Yeah, and I think it could be really useful to read about those experiences, and to read not just the report of the experience, but the well-crafted writing that draws the right lessons from it and illustrates it, and all of those things, even if you yourself experience it. And so it's not news, right? I mean, because this is this is the sort of left critique you see sometimes in Nickel and Dimed, that it's like, it's like, okay, hey, I don't need, whoever's speaking, right, I don't need to be told, right, that these jobs suck, right, I know that, right, but I think that oftentimes the nature of sort of petty injustice is that when it's happening to you, it's just a thing that sucks. And I think it's often really helpful to sort of get a little bit of distance from it and like see it as something that's like, see it happening to somebody else and seeing that other person interpret in a certain way, so that like I think that can actually help make something click. So it's like, this isn't just a thing that sucks the way that like, it sucks that it's raining and the bus is late, right, but oh, my boss is a dick, whatever, but like this is actually a political problem.
I mean, there's a quote from James Baldwin I love. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read, and speaking to exactly what you're talking about here, that people engage, they encounter horrible things in life, horrible things on the job. And the thing, like Barbara's example of feeling like your purse could be searched at any moment. I mean, if I ask a waitress what are the worst things about your job, she would have a long list probably, but she might have forgotten the fact that, on day one, the boss said, I can search your purse at any moment. And she just chalked that up to, oh yeah, well, I'm on the job. This is just what having a job in America is like. And Barbara's like, no, like she insists that is a grave injustice, that this is being done to you, that your boss has this kind of petty dictatorial power over you. And so she was so great at like picking out those kinds of details and problematizing them for everybody and putting them in a book where everyone else can be like, oh yeah, I hate it, the fact that my boss can do that to me. I would like to change that.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So somebody watching this, listening to this later, who hasn't read anything by her, where should they start?
Well, if you haven't read Nickel and Dimed, it's great. I mean, people talk about it as much as they do for a reason. It's an incredible book. She has a number of essay collections that are great. Basically, I think one for every decade. She's got at least 4 of them. Probably only the real heads will go back to read the 80s and 90s collections. The Worst Years of Our Lives, about the 80s, and the Snarling Citizen of the 90s. I would really suggest a book that is my favorite of hers, as I already mentioned, and it comes pretty close to hinting at what Barbara's positive vision for the world is. I mean, she was very good at writing these just devastating critiques of all the fucked up stuff that's going on in the world. And at the beginning of Bright-Sided, she dedicates it to all the complainers. I find the quote here. It's something like, to complainers everywhere, turn up the volume. So she was very good at turning up the volume on complaints. But Dancing in the Streets is this totally incredible book. The subtitle is a History of Collective Joy. And, it starts in the prehistoric period, works its way up through every major period up to the present. And it's her insisting that collective expressions of joy, including with strangers, including in sort of ecstatic nature, including, feasting and drinking and gathering together as a sort of social body in public, and just, celebrating, partying for whatever reason, is a sort of essential human characteristic that persists, to the beginning of our species, basically, or almost the beginning of our species. And as I said, you read a lot of Barbara's other stuff, you're like, oh, Barbara's kind of a grouch. I mean, she's a very witty grouch. She's a very funny grouch. She's a grouch. But in this book, she's like, this is central to who we are as human beings. And so, embrace that. And we need more of that. This is the sort of like a good life for all of us looks like, in part, us getting together in public and rejoicing at the sheer miracle of being alive together, and being willing to get wild. I mean, to unbutton a little bit and dance in the streets. And to me, that was just such a beautiful affirmation of joy. I mean, a lot of left intellectuals, a lot of us get into this game because we're really pissed off at how awful many aspects of the world are. And it's easy for that to curdle into a kind of antisocial, misanthropic streak that some people have. You read that book and you're like, Barbara is pushing it back against all of that. That despite the mountain of injustices that she has written about in 24 or more books, at the end of the day, Barbara wants to dance in the streets. And so if Barbara Ehrenreich, the grouch in chief, the socialist grouch in chief of the United States of America, wants you to get in the streets, if she believes that, she writes at the very end of the book about sort of joining a conga line going down a beach in I think in Rio, Brazil, that she was at. If Barbara Ehrenreich is getting into the streets and dancing, despite it all, then you should too. And that may be a kind of, it's not going to solve all of our problems. It's not, we all know the long list of things that we need to do in order to reverse all of the miseries that we're engaged in the world. But, you can't ignore the need to dance in the streets. So after Nickel and Dime, I would highly, highly recommend that people read Dancing in the Streets. Also, if you're signing up for a multi-book Barbara course, you can even read some of the other more depressing books, the bright-sided, the one dedicated to the complainers. Read the negative stuff and then top it all off with Dancing in the Streets, and you'll feel better about yourself and you'll feel better about humanity. I guarantee it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Micah.
Thanks.
There we go. All right. So, yeah, this is, I think what we're going to do is that was really good. I was really happy about how that went. We are going to play a little bit of actual Ehrenreich content to follow that up. I think that probably whet people's appetite for that. So before the philosophy segment with Dr. Jen, we are going to play a little bit of a lecture where Barbara Ehrenreich is actually talking about the content of that book, Dancing in the Streets. Then we're going to do the philosophy segment with Jen, and then we're probably going to be going to the post game about 10 minutes late, like about 10:10 is my guess. So let's play this.
I want to start by saying Americans are peculiarly obsessed by happiness. What is it? How do we achieve it? Are we having fun yet? Just in the last decade, there have been dozens of books on happiness. Some of the ones I saw on my bookshelf just as I was preparing for tonight were Authentic Happiness, Stumbling on Happiness, The Happiness Hypothesis. By the way, they're not on my bookshelf because I'm trying to get happy, but this was all research for the book Bright-Sided, which I just came out with. And there's a whole industry that exists to help you get happier. If you're not quite happy enough right now, you can hire a life coach, for example, and for an amount considerably greater than you'd pay a therapist, they'll work on getting you happier and happier. I liked this. You can take a good mood safari for only about $4,000 to New South Wales for 5 days, which will turn you into a happy person. Then, of course, there's just in the everyday, more routine kind of thing, there's the Life is Good line of products. You have them here. I don't know why they bother me so much. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that proposition, life is good, but I do not understand having to proclaim that on the tire cover on the back of your Jeep, as so many people do. I was actually in the grocery store in Alexandria, Virginia, where I live, a couple of weeks ago, and the man behind me in line had a T-shirt on it said, "Life is crap." And I thought, my man, you know, what a pickup line. Anyway, more seriously, Americans make up 2/3 of the world market for antidepressants. We're using them. And there was quite a bit of in the media, I don't know if you noticed it recently, about a recent sort of study purporting to show that women in America and industrialized countries have gotten less happy since 1972. This really alarmed me because you know what Phyllis Schlafly and others concluded from that. Actually, if you ask me about this afterwards, I'll talk about what's wrong with that study. But I have a lot of problems with this emphasis on happiness, and not because I'm a grouch. Part of it is just, what are we talking about with happiness? What do we mean by that word? Is it contentment? Is it self-satisfaction? Is it anticipation of good things? I have taken some of the happiness tests, the self-tests, on the internet and in some of these books on happiness, and I never know how to answer questions like, I am totally satisfied with my life. Yeah, you know, how can I say that when there's anybody suffering in the world? You know, so I was drawn back from that, and then there goes my happiness score. It's a very diffuse notion, in other words, and not very amenable to any kind of scientific conclusions, which we're always reading about. Now, so I would like to suggest another focus, much sharper, not diffuse, and that is not happiness, but joy. And I want to argue that one of the reasons that we have become so obsessed with happiness in our lives is that we have very few opportunities in our lives for acute pleasure and joy. Well, I'll leave out sexual pleasure anyway. And that ours is a culture sadly lacking in opportunities to experience acute and genuine joy. Now, all this line of thinking, and this is a line of thinking, we're not actually going to have a party here tonight, though I be fine with me. What I was reading, well, it must have been 10, 12 years ago now, reading, as I often do, about anthropology and, well, it sounds strange, but I often do like to read about anthropology and human evolution and so on. And I came across something that absolutely electrified me, probably because it evoked some sort of half-forgotten experiences of my own. What I came across, and I'm not the first or only person to come across this, but it kind of struck me with a lot of force, was that there have been organized ritual ways that groups of people have generated joy amongst themselves again and again in every part of the world. Now, my memories, my distant memories that were somewhat evoked by this were rock concerts. Anybody here from the 60s? Yeah, a few of us, yeah. Parties. And also, I would have to say, in my case, a distant memory of protests. Protests in the street, of marching in the street, when singing and chanting with thousands of different people, most of whom I didn't even know at all. How many of you have ever been to a club and danced all night, or a party? Oh, come on. Oh, come on. You know? Or experienced some kind of feeling of uplift and self-loss in another setting, maybe a church, maybe a rally, a sports event or something. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, you know the feeling. That is what I mean by collective joy. That's what I felt was sort of like a discovery when I was doing this reading years ago. And anyone who can find it in our largely joyless culture is truly blessed. And anyone who can find it again and again, I want to know their secret. What surprised me is that humans everywhere, as far back into prehistory as we can see, developed techniques for generating that kind of joy and used those techniques routinely. Now, these techniques, here's the recipe sort of, include 1, dancing to music. Got to have music, got to have dance. 2, feasting, probably with some drinking thrown in, but very important to have some feasting. 3, costuming, which can include masking and body paint, but any of those things, something that completely changes you. And these activities are often accompanied, depends on the culture, could be processions, by dramas, sporting competitions, comedy shows, whatever. And these are almost universal. I mean, I do not know, other than our own, other than modern cultures now, any traditional cultures that did not have events, festivities, or carnivals where these things happened. When European explorers and colonizers fanned out over the globe in the 16th to the 19th century, they found rituals and festivities like this everywhere they went. They found them among Native Americans in this continent. They found them among Polynesians, Sub-Saharan Africans, North Africans, Indian villagers, Inuit people. Everybody seemed to have some festival, some way, some ritual of generating collective joy. If they costumed, they danced around a fire at night or whatever. And sometimes people, through these activities, actually experienced a state of such uplift that they went into a trance, distinguishable to observers by odd postures, no longer being responsive, and reportedly very strange experiences. Now, European explorers were, especially by the 19th century, were often really horrified by what they saw. And I'm going to give you a quote here. This is not from an explorer, but this is from an English visitor to Trinidad in 1845. So he's talking about an African enslaved population in Trinidad. And he reported disgustedly that, quote, on Christmas Eve, it seemed as if under guise of religion, all pandemonium had broken loose, drunkenness bursting forth in yells and bacchanalian orgies was universal amongst the blacks. Sleep was out of the question in the midst of such a disgusting and fiendish saturnalia. The musicians were attended by a multitude of drunken people of both sexes, the women being of the lowest class, and all dancing, screaming, clapping their hands like so many demons. Now, that was a typical European response, in this case to African-derived, Euro and African-derived Christmas celebration. The Europeans tended to see these things and call them devil worship, call them savagery, call them lewd and obscene. They thought they were seeing some sort of spontaneous outburst of savage impulses that Europeans, at least, were refined and civilized enough to repress. And in fact, I would say this response to native people's rituals and festivities became a central part of white racism as it has persisted. The Europeans thought that one of the key things that made them superior to the people they conquered and enslaved around the world was that the Europeans, never did such wild things themselves. But they were wrong, wrong on all counts. First, they were wrong to see to describe what they were seeing as obscene. These events were not usually about sex, in the sense of couples having sex. Certainly, on all sorts of festivities, in couples might sneak off at some point into the woods or into the darkness or whatever. But the real climax, so to speak, of many of these rituals or festivity, rituals anyway, was this achievement of a trance state in which individuals could report that they had some kind of communication with a deity or achieved unity with a deity. Another thing is that what they made the Europeans so wrong in their interpretation of this is that they were not viewing spontaneous outbursts of some kind of savagery or anything. What they were seeing was events that had taken a lot of preparation and forethought on a lot of people. Now we're going to talk more about that, but everything about it, the music, the face paint, the special foods that had to be prepared for the feasts, all of this could take weeks of preparation, months of preparation even. Another way the Europeans were very wrong is that they did not understand, many of them, what they were viewing was part of the European tradition too. It was just as much a European trait, in fact. To go back to the ancient Greeks, they engaged in ecstatic danced rituals so much that they needed to have a god who was specialized in ecstasy, in danced rituals. And that was the god Dionysus or Dionysus, I never know how to say it, a god of ecstasy. Women especially worshiped him, and in ways that now look, at least to someone like me, like a form of proto-feminist revolt. Really, that in one of the kinds of stories about the visits of the god Dionysus is that women would drop their housework or their weaving or whatever they were doing or taking care of their children, just drop it, run off into the forests and the mountains for wild dances lasting days and nights. Really. And this went on for centuries in one form or another. Off into the mountains, even in the dead of winter, women would go to worship the god. It was a really pious thing to do. You really had to do it. And then there is evidence, which I assembled in my book, Dancing in the Streets, that Christianity itself, until about the 13th century, was largely a danced religion. Now, this is a total surprise considering the attitudes, that later European Christians had. But churches until about the 14th century, I think, had no pews. People did not sit or expect to sit for worship. They expected to move around. They expected to dance. When dancing was eventually banned in the churches, it went outside the churches, but not far, in the form of carnival or other festivities that were based on the church calendar. And again, you would have, this is the European carnival tradition now, elaborate productions with costuming, miming, or do you say memeing, whatever, one of those things, drinking, eating, and always dancing in the streets. People coming out of their houses, going from house to house, dancing together. People of all ages doing this. Other parts of the carnival tradition, not only in Europe, but in other parts of the world, are other ways of breaking down normal kinds of hierarchy, such as mocking the powerful. In the European carnival tradition, that meant there might be a king of fools at the carnival, or there might be lots of people dressed up as priests and nuns and behaving obscenely on purpose. And they might carry this right on in the Feast of Fools in the Catholic Church. In France, another breaking down of boundaries I should mention, which is a feature of European carnival tradition and many others, is transvestism. Breaking down that gender barrier. And women dressing as men, men dressing as women. Let's get rid of that old identity. In France in the 15th century, there was so much of this, 1 out of 4 days of the year was devoted to such festivities. Can you imagine? People did not live to work as we do. They lived to play. I would just want to.
All right.
Ben says he doesn't want to wear a dress 4 days a year.
What was it? Well, it was more than 4 days a year. It was the
Oh.
Guess it wouldn't be so bad if we were living here in Michigan. I don't know. It's cold much of the time. But I guess I get used to it.
I have many dresses you can always borrow.
Fair enough. I'm not sure I would fit, but in any case, what are we talking about for the philosophy segment tonight?
Fruitcake.
Fruitcake. All right. Jake, do we have the clip?
I think the most disappointing cake has to be fruitcake, You think that would be better. It doesn't add up. Fruit, good. Cake, great. Fruitcake, nasty crap. Have you tried fruitcake? I don't even think that's fruit in there. You're like, what is that, a Skittle? So what is a seed here? What is this, a treasure map? What is the recipe of fruitcake? Anything but fruit? It's like the baker was just clearing off the counter. Put all this crap in there. Nobody eats this stuff. They just mail it to relatives.
All right. So
have you ever had fruitcake?
I was trying to remember.
I don't think I ever had.
I don't think I have. Yeah. I think I'm trying to remember if I don't think so. I think.
No, I definitely have never had.
Yeah. I mean, if I had, it would have maybe been one of the times I was, visiting family in the UK, but
I'm surprised your mom hasn't made it.
Can't recall.
Hi, Kathy. Oh, hi, J. Andrew. I forgot.
Can't recall off the top of my head. But Jim Gaffigan, when he says fruit good, cake good.
Cake great.
Oh, so fruit good, cake great.
Great.
Fruit cake nasty crap. What logical fallacy is he pointing out there?
He is pointing out the fallacy of composition, which is not like English composition.
Yeah. So the fallacy of composition would be the mistaken reasoning we make when we
compose. Like Beethoven. No, when we assume that something that's true of the parts is true of the whole.
Yeah. So
you can't just stick any old good things together. Do you remember that? No, you don't watch Friends. You're too good for Friends. That episode,
like a couple episodes of Friends. I was never into
that episode where Rachel was making something and she was using a cookbook. Who does that nowadays? She was using a cookbook and it was supposed to be a dessert, but 2 of the pages had gotten stuck together. And on the second page, which wasn't really the second page, it was something that had beef in it. So she made, I think it was a beef trifle or something. And it was gross. So yeah, you can't take 2 things that are good and smush them together.
Yeah. So fallacy of composition is the mistake that we make in reasoning when we make the assumption that whatever's true of the parts of something, even of all of the parts of something, is therefore going to be true of the whole thing. So oftentimes, like informal logic textbooks will illustrate this with stuff like all of the atoms that make up the Brooklyn Bridge are invisible to the naked eye. Therefore, the Brooklyn Bridge as a whole is invisible to the naked eye. It's obvious,
Wait, who is this that doesn't like cake? I don't know if you should be here.
Do they not like cake, or do they just not like?
No,
fruit
he doesn't
cake?
like cake.
Oh, well, I can't speak to that.
Have you considered getting professional help? There are hotlines you can call.
Yeah. So yeah. So the Brooklyn Bridge example gives you the idea of like the structure of this, but of course that's not a mistake that anybody would ever actually make. So it might be more interesting to think about cases where arguably people actually do commit this all the time, right? So one, I was looking earlier today, we were trying to decide which fallacy to do for tonight's philosophy segment, and I was looking at the notes from when you teach them all for your critical thinking class, and you had
I have a huge PowerPoint with 200 slides.
Yeah,
on fallacies.
And this caught my eye because you have an example in there that's very similar to something I say about the composition fallacy in my first book, and something I did in a debunk in the Michael Brooks show a long time ago, which I think, which I think is actually the debunk that Anna Kasparian told me played a big role in making her a socialist. And it's about education. And sometimes I did this at least once in a critical thinking class. I said, like, first day, probably shouldn't do this because it's like not in my interest to discourage people from thinking that getting a college education is valuable. But it is a really good illustration of the fallacy. You talk about.
Can I break in here?
Yeah, please.
We are starting the Cooper Rush era next week. You excited?
There we go.
Go on.
So,
don't worry about it.
Oh, that's all right. My focus is on important things like the first preseason's Red Wings game in a couple weeks. But
the person I'm talking to knows what I'm saying.
In any case, so the example you use in there is about free community college, which is a good thing. We both support that. Would go much further. I forget first 2 years of community college. I'd say, preschool through grad school, but there's a bad way of arguing for that, where you say, well, people who have these credentials, have gone through better, higher phases of education, get better jobs. So if everybody does that, then everybody could get a better job. But does that work?
No.
No, why not?
No. Because, you remember back in your day when all you needed was a diploma, a high school diploma, and you were considered educated, and that could get you the best job because you had a high school diploma? That doesn't get you anything anymore.
When do you think
it gets you more than no diploma? But
when do you think my day was?
Like the 1920s.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So yeah, the reason why, back in the 1920s that I so vividly remember, having a high school diploma was a big deal. And much later on, having a college diploma was, and et cetera, is that, and this is not some like weird radical socialist point. This is like first chapter of your wildly pro-capitalist Econ 101 textbook point. Supply and demand work the same way in the labor market they do in any other market. That the reason why having degrees that most people don't have gives you more bargaining power in the labor market is that most people don't have them. If everybody had them, right, or the equivalent, then you would not, in fact, get any particular, bargaining boost from the fact that you have these. It's like when people say, all those fast food workers, making minimum wage or 25 cents more than minimum wage, they should just, learn how to code. Well, if everybody learned how to code, if everybody working a minimum wage job currently learned how to code, knowing how to code would get you exactly zero economic boost because it would be wildly oversupplied. People who had that skill would be paid what, burger flippers are right now. In fact, burger flippers are being paid a little bit better now because of the pandemic and labor shortages and all that stuff. But I mean, you can't, if you're going to argue for, free college, which you should. I think we should have free college, but it can't be on that basis because that doesn't make any sense. Like you had you had a baseball analogy, I think, in your PowerPoint.
Oh, did you want me to tell
Do you
it?
feel like sharing it?
It's secret. Yeah. So the idea is that if you're at a baseball game and it's the third inning and nothing exciting is really happening, and you stand up, your view will be improved, right?
Sure.
You'll have a better view.
Stands to reason.
And if it's the bottom of the ninth and things are really exciting and you stand up, will your view be improved?
No.
Why not?
Because everybody else will be.
Everybody else is standing up. So yeah, if you do it and you're the only one doing it, then you're better off. But if everybody's doing it, then you're not any better off than anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is really crucially important because, people say, oh, yeah, that person, shouldn't complain that they, minimum wage isn't higher. They should just go back to school. Well, that can work for individuals, but it can't work for everybody in those circumstances because that's like everybody standing up at once, right? You don't get the advantage. You don't get the comparative advantage anymore. You have to do something to actually raise the floor for everybody if you want that outcome. And I do think we should have free college, but I think we should have free college because going to college is a valuable human experience that everybody should get, not because
if they want it.
Everybody.
I think we've had this discussion
everybody should get if they want. I'm not saying that we should be, frog marching people at gunpoint to the gates of campus and making them register for classes. But everybody should have the option of having if they want to. But
well, I remember us having this conversation before about whether everybody should go to college.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I don't literally think everybody should go to college in that sense that if like somebody just doesn't want to, should like make them, but but I think it's a good thing. It's a good and positive human experience.
But it's not for everybody.
Sure, which is fine, but it should be for everybody who wants it.
Yes.
And education.
This is how it's like around here.
Education doesn't solve poverty. You need to actually tackle the poverty part to solve poverty. So with that, we're going to go to the post game. We're going to be joined by Catherine Liu, which should be a lot of fun. She's always fun. We're going to be talking more Ehrenreich. So if you are not yet a GTAA patron, that is patreon.com/Ben Burgis. And for $5 a month, you get access to every single post game for patrons after the regular Monday night episodes. Sometimes you get bonus episodes. You get access to the Discord server. You get all kinds of good things. But most importantly, you get our eternal love and gratitude for helping to keep this thing going. So if you like what we do here, please do consider doing that. With that, I will see you in the post game.
Team Snoopy forever.
Left is best.